Hey, Jim Bergman on behalf of AccuTools. Get a common question on what kind of a rig should I put together. I'm going to get my vacuum rigs ironed out and I want to figure out what kind of stuff I need to buy, and really what it comes down to is how much money should I spend on this to get it going. And I wanted to talk about a couple different things because I think they're all really important. One of the first things is the pump, right? And here I've got a couple different things. I've got a 2 CFM battery pump, I've got a 4 CFM battery pump, I've got the Fieldpiece pump, and I've also got the Hillmore cheapest pump you can buy. I think it's a 3 CFM pump, and they're all a little bit different, and but they all do basically the same thing. Every single one of these pumps is just designed to reduce pressure and draw a vacuum, and that's their primary job. Well, what differentiates these pumps is features, right? If I want just a small pump for residential and I want to do not have to haul a cord across the roof, this is a great 2 CFM pump for that. Super light. That's why I'm going to grab this one on my truck when I'm going to go, for residential, light commercial jobs, because it's just so easy and convenient to carry. A little bit bigger of a pump, 4 CFM if I want to do this, but again, battery powered, that's the big convenience. This one does have a gas ballast on it, and it's also got a lift hook, but it's got some pretty nice features on it, and it's, again, eliminates the cord on there, makes it easier to use. Fieldpiece VP85, this is one of my favorite pumps because of the integrated manifold on here. And this is a really, got a lot of engineered solutions on here. It's got an exhaust vent on here to exhaust the oil gases away. Quick oil change on there. This thing takes 20 seconds to change the oil. You can change it while it's running. DC motor, cord management. It's just a very well engineered solution, and what I like for those reasons. And then obviously we got the Hillmore pump here. But they all do the same thing, and if you have a good vacuum pump, that is not something you necessarily have to buy unless you want to upgrade your features on here. Now, one of the first things we want to do here, and I'm going to pull this gauge off here for just a minute, is we always want to test the vacuum pump and make sure that the pump works well. So I'm going to have, why don't you come in here a little bit with the camera, and we're going to go ahead and connect the gauge to the pump, if I can get my, at a weird angle here. All right, there we go. And hopefully you can see that close here. And I'm gonna close off make sure everything's tight. I'm gonna turn the pump on, open up the valve on the pump, and that should pull down right away, and it should go down below 20 microns is a good place. 20 to 25 microns these pumps are rated at. You notice that that's slowing down. That's completely normal on there. It will slow down. And once we see it's hitting in the 20 micron range, we know our pump is good. And I want you to notice, though, if I isolate this off, you're going to see a quick rise in vacuum. And the reason we see that rise in vacuum is because this volume is so small. We're measuring everything leaks, so it's all about overcoming the leak rate. And this will continue to rise because even though it's pretty tight, it's not 100% vacuum sealed. Nothing ever is, because we have rubber connectors here. There's some outgassing going on, those types of things. So that vacuum will continue to rise. But the reason we're seeing all that movement is because of the small volume we have here. I mean, this is very, very tiny. Now, what you got to realize here is if you have a bigger volume, that leak rate will not show up near as much. This is not a leaking gauge. This is not a bad pump, because these pumps are just designed to isolate the vacuum and more or less hold the oil in here. But it is a reality of what we're dealing with. So now that we got the pump tested, I'm going to go ahead and shut that off here, and we know that we're in good shape with the pump, and I got to close that cap back off. Now, the next thing you need to know is what type of a vacuum rig do I need on here, and what's going to work. Well, this is a 5-ton system here, and I've got 50 foot of 7/8 line, and I got 50 foot of 3/8. The reason I have it hooked up like this is because this fitting here, this 3/8 fitting, actually goes way to the back here and connects to this 7/8 line. So imagine this is your suction service valve right here. It goes all the way through the copper tubing. It goes through the coil, comes out the other side of the coil, and then it comes here to the 3/8 tubing, and then this is all the way at the far end. So this is just like you'd have your residential system. If it had a 5-ton coil and 50 foot of 7/8 3/8 line set, I'm literally evacuating from one side of the system to the other. I've got my vacuum gauge hooked up at the farthest side of the system. I've got the Schrader core in the vacuum gauge. I've got to make sure that this thing's snug on here, finger tight, so that I'm going to read vacuum on here, and then I'm going to connect to this side of the system. Now, when you're first taking your core out, right, there is no pressure on this system, so we're going to just pull the vacuum core out of here. So if you want to come in here so you can see with the core coming out. I don't have to have the core tool on at this point. I'm just going to pull the core out and I'm going to set that aside. Then I'm going to go ahead and hook my core tool up right to my coil, and then I'm going to connect my vacuum pump that we've already tested up to the system. Now notice that I've got a TruBlu hose set up here. I have this set up. I have the clamps on already, so I've got a 3/8 by 1/4 inch connection. This is the way that I'm going to store this in my bag. Once I put the clamps on here, have the fittings on, I don't have to take these on and off every time. This is just finger tight on here. Same thing with this. They don't need to be cranked on real tight. The fittings will seal all on their own without the tension here. This is literally just so that it doesn't fall off. The larger clamp typically goes next to the pump, and then we have the smaller clamp that goes next to the coil. The reason that we have two different styles of clamp, to be 100% honest with you, is it's just cost. These aluminum clamps cost a lot less money. So we're building a kit out there. We could put the aluminum clamps in at about maybe 1/4 of the cost of the stainless steel ones. So with the stainless steel, affords us a lot of room in there. So when you're asking why do we have different clamps, it's literally just to make the kit at the lowest cost that we can. So when you can connect this down on here, so I'm going to snug this guy up. Again, everything just gets finger tight. Make sure after you test your pump that you have your 1/4 inch cap back on there. Now I'm going to connect up to this port here, and I'm going to explain a couple different things for you. Just like if we were to test the, just like we tested the coupler here and we isolated off, if we test the hose, you're going to see decay on that too. This is also a small volume, especially when you consider the volume that's in this 7/8 tubing, this 3/8 tubing, and this coil. There's a lot more volume here. Now I have a core tool on here and the core removed so I can isolate my vacuum. I'm going to go ahead and turn my pump back on, open up my back half here on my valve. Now I'm going to open up this one. That's going to start pulling down. Now I'm going to go ahead and restart the app here, dismiss, and restart recording. And now what you caught there was my pull down on my vacuum pump. So now I'm going to let this run. You can see here I've got some oil mist coming out of here, and that oil mist is what we'd use the Fieldpiece pump. If we wanted to ventilate that out, we'd actually ventilate that out by connecting a garden hose to this end of it, and then we could vent the exhaust gases outside if we needed to. Most of the time we're not evacuating indoors, so it's not an issue, but if you're in a restaurant or other place where you need to get rid of that exhaust gases because you're around food and things like that, then this is a great pump to do that, where the other pumps don't, again, offer you that feature. So now this one's pulling down here. It's going to take several seconds before we get a good vacuum started here. In fact, we just got it now, so we're down to 20,000 microns. You'll see on the micro, because this gauge does not read from atmospheric down like the LT and the Pro do. It starts at 20,000 microns, so it's just going to have a big dive straight down when it hits the 20,000 micron point. So we'll let this run for a few minutes and we'll take a look at the vacuum. But a couple other things I want to really stress the importance of. Good vacuum pump oil, right? This is the Navac pump oil. It's actually very expensive oil, but it's one of the best oils out there as far as a deep vacuum goes. If you put that in your pumps, you're going to get better performance out of them. Fieldpiece also makes a really good oil, and one of the things they do is they recommend an oil change every time you use the pump, especially if you're using it for service work. If you're using it for installations, you could probably get several evacuations out of it. The key thing is to test it. Put the vacuum gauge on and see how far it'll pull down. If your pump only pull down to 30 microns or 40 microns, odds are you have bad oil in your pumps. That's the first thing you want to take and change on there. But it doesn't matter what pump you use. Again, all these are rated, these are probably rated at 20 microns, maybe 15, maybe 20 microns. You know, as long as you're pulling down to that 25 micron range, your pump is fine. So now we got this thing cruising down here. I'm again measuring vacuum, or pulling vacuum on this side of the system and measuring it over here. Now a couple things I want you to realize. We're at 70, I gotta get my glasses on here. Actually, maybe I can just hit the backlight. We're at 1150 microns, 1050 microns already, right? The pressure here is much higher than the pressure is over here. There always has to be a pressure difference to create flow. So when I'm measuring on the farthest side of the system, I'm already down to 1,000 microns. Now, hitting 500 is not enough. You'll see on my system here, I actually have this set up on the app. Let me pull this back up again here. I have this set up on the app to for 100 microns for my target evacuation and 200 microns for my decay. Most manufacturers don't call for vacuums that low. However, going back to the 60s, when we had systems that are still running today that's exactly what they did, because they understood the science of evacuation. So I highly recommend that you use those targets for new system installations. And this is very reflective of a new system installation. I should probably be able to hit this in about 10 to 12 minutes at 100 microns. And then we're going to go ahead and we'll isolate it, and I'll show you how that works. So we're going to let this run for a couple more minutes, and then we'll just come back to the video and I'll show you where we're at, and we'll close this thing up. All right, so we've got this down now. We're down at about 83 microns, and if you take a look here, we're down at 82 microns. So this is the farthest end of the system. So remember, our pump pulled below 20, so we're expecting the pump to be somewhere around 20 microns at this end and 80 microns at that. If I take a look at the time here, I'm just going to scroll back on the graph here. It's about 35 seconds is when the vacuum first started, or if you want to go all the way back to the end here, we are at approximately 13 minutes, 4 seconds to get to 100 microns, 13 minutes to get to 100 microns on a 5-ton system with a 5-ton coil, right? That's not a long time to wait on here. So when you're looking at, what do I need to actually get this done? You literally need a TruBlu hose, a core tool, and a micro, and you can get the evacuation done. So now what we're going to do is called our isolation test. And what I want to do here is I want to slowly close off the core tool, because there's R-trap gases in your core tool. So I'm going to slowly close that core tool off. And once I get that core tool closed, now I'm going to go on my app here and I'm going to say, start my decay test. And what that's going to do is you're going to time it now. You're going to wait 10 minutes or so, and we're going to make sure that that vacuum doesn't rise. Now what you're going to see, if you watch this over time, is this vacuum here, in fact it just started going down again, will continue to drop. Because even though I isolated it down here at the core tool and I isolated it off, remember the pressure's lower here than it is up here. And now the pressure's equalizing. So if I have a nice tight system, I'll expect to see this thing drop after it's been isolated for maybe a couple minutes, depending on the size of the system. If there's a leak on the system, this will rise almost immediately when I isolate it off. It'll literally go straight up and down. So again, just to recap all this, you need to select the pump you need with the features you want. Maybe the pump that you have is okay. You can start a TruBlu on a shoestring budget. You literally need a TruBlu basic evacuation kit, the micro gauge. You put those two together and that gets you started. Now for a lot of guys, what they'll end up doing is buying the starter kit and then later on buying the pro gauge with the other features they want. It's always good to have a second vacuum gauge and spare parts when you're doing evacuation, because things do go wrong or you want to test them or compare them, and having that second gauge will be very, very helpful as you go along. But that's not a huge investment to make to get started. And with the end of the coronavirus stuff coming, all those service calls and installs you put off, those are all going to catch up to you, and now's the time to get the tools that you need to get this done quickly once we get the economy up and moving back again quick, to get it all done fast. And it's just going to, 13 minutes to get to 100 microns I don't think you can go much faster than that. But hopefully this gives you an idea of what you can do. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them on the video below. If you would, please like our videos. I appreciate that. And if you've got any questions, again, please ask. This is Jim. Thanks a lot for watching.